Today, I'm announcing the unsealing of a 3-count indictment, charging Sean Combs with racketeering conspiracy, sex trafficking, interstate transportation for prostitution. The indictment alleges that between at least 2008 and the present, Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct. As alleged in the indictment, to carry out this conduct, Sean Combs led and participated in a racketeering conspiracy that used the business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. Let me say a little bit more about the charges. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times by their hair. On one occasion in March of 2016, that conduct was captured on video and later reported in the media. Specifically, Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a victim in a Los Angeles hotel when the victim was attempting to flee. As alleged, these assaults often resulted in injuries to the victims, which took days or weeks to heal. In addition to the violence, the indictment alleges that Combs threatened and coerced victims to get them to participate in the freak-offs. He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims. And the indictment alleges that he maintained control over the victims in several ways, including by giving them drugs, by giving and threatening to take away financial support or housing, by promising them career opportunities, by monitoring their whereabouts, and even by dictating their physical appearance. Because of all of this, the indictment alleges that the victims did not believe they could refuse Combs without risking their security or facing more abuse. The indictment also alleges other acts of violence undertaken by Combs and others, including violence against witnesses to his abuse, kidnapping, and arson. The indictment alleges that on more than one occasion, Combs carried or brandished firearms.
The entertainment industry is currently facing one of its biggest scandals involving Diddy. This isn't just another celebrity feud, it's a major controversy with lawsuits piling up and surprising names being linked to the drama. Let's take a closer look at the details and try to understand how this story has pulled in not only Diddy, but also other unexpected celebrities.
Tonight here, new and disturbing accusations against Sean Diddy Combs. A Texas attorney tonight says he now represents 120 alleged victims, men and women, whose allegations span more than 30 years. The accounts of the alleged victims have not been fully vetted, but their accusations involve the kind of drug-fueled, alleged sexual assaults described in a dozen civil lawsuits and the criminal case against Combs. Combs has pleaded not guilty to federal charges. His attorney tonight saying Combs emphatically denies.
Let's begin with the accusations against Diddy himself. The lawsuits are deeply troubling, with one involving a 16-year-old girl who attended one of Diddy's famous white parties. These exclusive and extravagant events have been a big part of his image, but now they are at the center of a scandal that could seriously damage his legacy. This hit headlines.
Breaking news, the Department of Homeland Security has just confirmed to CNN that federal law enforcement agents have raided properties owned by musician and producer Sean Diddy Combs. Let's bring in CNN security correspondent Josh Campbell and CNN legal analyst Joey Jackson. Josh, let me start with you. What are these raids by federal agents in multiple locations tell you about the seriousness of this investigation?
Yeah, Wolf, a very significant development here, seeing this law enforcement action taking place. I'll point out, just to be clear at the outset, we don't know that Sean Diddy Combs himself is the subject or target of a federal investigation. So it's just worth pointing that out at this hour. But what we do know is that two properties associated with him, we saw the feds descend on those properties. We saw on aerial footage, federal agents both here in the Los Angeles area as well as in Miami at those residences. Now, the Department of Homeland Security, their what's called HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, gave CNN a statement. I'll read you part of that when asked about what this activity is. They say that earlier today, HSI New York executed law enforcement actions as part of an ongoing investigation with assistance from HSI Los Angeles, HSI Miami, and our local law enforcement partners. That is it, confirming that they are conducting what they're deeming law enforcement action, which could indicate search warrants being conducted there, could indicate arrests being conducted. We just don't know at this hour specifically what that law enforcement action is. It is worth pointing out, though, that Combs himself obviously has faced significant legal woes in recent months. I'll give you just a kind of the highlights of what actually occurred. In November, he was sued for rape and abuse by a former partner. That lawsuit was then settled very quickly. But in December, he faced sexual assault allegations in a complaint filed in the Southern District of New York. The suit was brought by a woman referred to as Jane Doe, who said that she was 17 at the time when these allegations took place back in 2003. He was accused of sex trafficking and gang rape, among other allegations, also in that suit naming two of his associates. Of course, Combs denied any wrongdoing there. And then just last month, a former employee of Combs filed a suit also in the state of New York, accusing him of sexual assault, of sexual harassment, and, quote, grooming. That former employee stated that he had worked for Combs between 2022 and 2023. Among those allegations, this former employee, a male employee, said that Combs did not compensate him for his music production work and forced him to procure and interact with sex workers, threatened him with serving alcoholic beverages laced with drugs to guests at parties at Combs' home. And then Combs' son, Justin Combs, was also accused of soliciting prostitutes and underage girls at his father's homes. Again, the Combs have denied any wrongdoing, but just a series of allegations that we've seen taking place. Final point, Wolf, I'll note is that while we don't know the specific allegations or why the feds are at these residences, it is worth pointing out the agency that is conducting this law enforcement activity. It's not the FBI, it's not the DEA or the ATF. This is HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. For those unfamiliar, this is an agency that has long been the forefront specifically at human trafficking investigations. So although we don't have the specifics yet, we're starting to we can glean just based on which agency has the lead, the direction this might go. But again, we don't yet know that Combs himself was the target of the investigation, Wolf. We do know that this hour that federal agents were at two of his homes, both here in Los Angeles and in Florida, Wolf.
Yeah, important points. Joey Jackson, let me repeat, we don't know if Sean Diddy Combs himself is
Diddy's legal team has strongly denied the accusations, calling them publicity stunts, and insisting that the truth will come out in court. They claim Diddy has never witnessed any abuse. However, the seriousness of the allegations and the sheer number of lawsuits make them hard to ignore. Reports suggest he could face up to 120 legal cases, a figure so shocking it feels more like a conspiracy thriller than reality.
It's not good if your homes are actually being raided.
No, it's not, Wolf. And I think, whatever conclusions can be drawn remain to be seen, right? There's not an indictment that we're talking about. That means that we're not speaking of a grand jury having rendered a conclusion, not as to guilt. That's not what grand jurors do, but as to reason to believe that a crime was committed and he committed them. Having said that, whenever you have a raid and an investigation, these things need to be really predicated upon, right? The precursor for this to happen would be some probable cause. What is that probable cause? We don't know. But let's go back to what Josh Campbell talked about, which are those various lawsuits. Now, lawsuits are civil actions in nature. They're not criminal at all. But what they do is they give authorities some guidelines and guideposts with respect to alleged conduct that was engaged in, with regard to who it was engaged in, what activities there were, what it involved. And so that, if there's an investigation, could serve as a source of plentiful information. That information could be further investigated, right, by certainly this Homeland Security agency. And as a result of that, they can work with their local law enforcement partners. What does that mean? It means that they, collectively, law enforcement, try to determine whether there's reason to believe that crimes were committed and, were those crimes carried out and associated in any way we don't know, with Sean Combs. And so that remains to be seen. But before authorities, can get into the home or property of anyone, you have to establish some firm basis to do that. And that is what at least we can conclude, that they had reason to believe that there were crimes involving sex trafficking, apparently, and that these areas potentially can give more information with respect to the specifics. And I think they would be looking for computer devices and other devices which would seem to indicate or give information as to whether there was any criminality very early in the process. But certainly we know that these have been carried out, and we'll see what, if any, information is gleaned to be suggestive of any criminality.
Very interesting. Josh, let me get back to you. You know the FBI very well. Under what circumstances would raids like these be conducted?
Well, this would require, if it is indeed a search that's being conducted, it would require federal officers, in this case with Homeland Security investigations, going to a judge and seeking a warrant, indicating that we believe that evidence of a crime could be located in these residences. And then this third party, an independent judge, has to approve that warrant. And then you see take place what's happening now on our screen. I particularly want to focus on, you see that large RV-looking vehicle there. This is the mobile command post that federal agencies will send whenever they're going to be somewhere, likely for a long time. I mean, if you look at these residences, we're talking about very large estates. And so, as Joey was mentioning, something as simple as a thumb drive or anywhere where electronic media could be stored, if it's on that warrant, authorities can search that residence top to bottom, looking for any type of device, any type of...
The situation becomes even more dramatic as these cases reportedly involve several well-known individuals in addition to Diddy, making the scandal even more complex and far-reaching.
Got 7 grandkids now.
Yeah, they
Grandpa?
call me Papa Snoop.
What kind of gramps are you?
You can get away with anything with me. Whatever your parents won't let you do, come over here. You can't eat candy, can't watch TV late night, you can't do this. I'm the can.
Some of these celebrities are accused of being involved, while others are linked to Diddy's inner circle without facing direct accusations. It's a tangled web that includes some of the biggest names in music, entertainment, and even royalty.
Hip-hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs will try for the 3rd time to get bail today while he awaits trial on sex trafficking and racketeering charges. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York City, where this hearing happened earlier today. Alex, there was already a hearing earlier this week looking at notes taken out of Sean Combs' cell. How could that impact his chances at bail? His team says that raiding his cell, monitoring his calls, is not allowed and not fair to allow him to prep for a trial.
You know, it'll be interesting to see if this ends up happening. We just got out of this hearing, nearly 2 hours long, and they only talked about these notes at the very beginning. They discussed essentially whether or not they said the word legal on them. And there was a bit of a discrepancy from the defense. Essentially, they backtracked on this even just a little bit. Essentially, he has these binders, legal pads that, according to the photographs from the raid on his cell, did not say the word legal. All of a sudden, now they do. And the defense couldn't exactly say when the word legal was written. And that matters because if it said legal on any of these notes, that is part of attorney-client privilege. Those are things that should not have been taken out of his cell. So there is a big question about that. But Nate, the bigger issue here now is he going to get out? As of tonight, he is still going back to his jail cell. But next week, we will know whether or not he is going to be able to get out until his trial. So the big discussion here, according to the government, is can they trust him? He has proposed a whole laundry list of things that he's willing to do if they'll let him out. Things like 24/7 security, things like not speaking to anybody, not having internet access, phone access, unless it's through this 24/7 security company. But the government and pretrial services, who is separate from the prosecution, they're not buying it. They're saying that they cannot trust Sean Combs to not follow the law or to not follow the rules that he has even set out for himself. They say because he's already broken the rules that the Bureau of Prisons and his own counsel have laid out for him within a jail cell. So they're essentially saying if he can't do it there, how could he do it in the comfort of an apartment? They had tried to get him released to Star Island, his home on Star Island right in Miami, because it's an island and there's a dock there. The judge immediately said absolutely not, because in theory he could, escape that way. They don't necessarily.
Yes, you read that right. Prince Harry has been mentioned in connection with this case. To be clear, there are no allegations against him. He was simply referenced in the lawsuits because of past associations with certain events or people in Diddy's circle. Still, his name being included has raised eyebrows and added an unexpected twist to the story. Other names linked to this case include music industry giants like Nicki Minaj, Usher, and producer Harve Pierre.
Concern. So what his defense team has now proposed instead is bringing him to an Upper East Side apartment, a 3-bedroom apartment where they say they would have 2 security guards inside of his apartment at all times, 1 downstairs. Again, the judge has not really said whether or not he is keen on this. He didn't really disclose if he's leaning one way or another, but he did ask a lot of questions about what that would look like. Again, the government not buying it, as well as pretrial services, which is the organization, the department that would have to make sure that everything was on the up and up.
Yeah, Alex, I wonder also, whether there was discussion of that now infamous video back from 2016 of Combs beating his girlfriend at the time, Cassie, the, entertainer. Did that get discussed at all in the hearing today?
It did, because the defense is saying that the prosecution basically took the video that CNN originally published and gave it to the judge in that exact form, which is that it was edited down and they say out of order. They say essentially that the video ends with Cassie being dragged back to the room. They say that's not how it happened. They say it's important to know that that is not how it happened. But according to the defense, they say, or according to the government rather, they say it doesn't really matter because what you can see is what happened there. Her getting beaten up, her getting kicked, all of these violent things in nature. And what I don't think has been reported enough is that the allegation here isn't just that it was a squabble between the two of them, that it was the defense calls a lover's quarrel, but that inside the hotel room down the hallway, that there was a male sex worker there that was part of these freak-offs. So it's not just about the abuse that happened in the hallway, but the prosecution wants to bring this into evidence because of what was actually happening inside of that hotel room. Now, the defense maintains that that wasn't the case. They maintain that the fight actually happened because he was just trying to get his phone and clothing back. But even still, this video was even used today in the discussion about how violent they believe Sean Combs is and why he cannot be released on bail.
Yeah, Alex, I read about 90% politics all day long, but I mean, this is one of the stories that, breaks through, especially coming from the entertainment industry, such a big entertainer for such a long time. Safe to say that this story not going anywhere anytime soon. National correspondent Alex Miller live.
For some, their connection to Diddy appears to be purely social or professional. However, in such a sensitive situation, even a casual mention can have serious consequences. Just being linked to allegations of this magnitude can be damaging, regardless of actual involvement.
If I was to release those tapes, the world would shut down, okay? If I showed one of these tapes, I'm telling you right now, the whole music industry and Hollywood, it would just grind down like this. They're all gonna start pointing at each other like this, and it's gonna be bad.
Oh, it's gonna get bad, all right. Welcome to Popcorn Planet's Diddygate coverage. I'm Andy Signor, and there's been a lot of talk about this alleged memoir from Kim Porter. Her family is now deeming that it's fake. Diddy's own lawyer saying it's shameless, it's a scam. Amazon has actually pulled it because of Sean Combs' kids saying that it's fake. But now the author has gone and broken his silence and done an interview with The Art of the Dialogue. And it's pretty damning, guys. It's pretty fascinating. Now, look, I'd love to get this guy on the show. We are trying our best. This is the author. His name is Chris Todd, and he's here talking about a lot. We're going to go through some of these clips, and we're going to break this down even further in our live later today. There's also Jaguar White right out there doing a lot of stuff. We got so many updates, guys. If you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed. Hit that bell for all alerts. Smash that all so you get notified. And when you get notified, hit that like and leave a comment down below. Helps get these videos in the algorithm, and it's important we get this stuff out there. Now, do I believe this guy? I don't know what to believe, but man, Art of the Dialogue, the guy who's interviewing here does not. He gets extremely defensive. It's kind of a hard watch. I'd love to have Chris on, and we're reaching out to him. Chris, come on the show. I want to play some of these clips, though, so you can get a gauge of what you think about this guy and is the author of this book. Does he sound legit? Here's some clips. Here's Will and Jada mentioned.
Can you explain how the alleged memoir portrays the nature of Kim Porter's relationship with Diddy? Was an open relationship mentioned in the book verified by any source close to them?
About their sex life?
An open relationship.
Means a sex life. Yes, we have sources, and multiple sources said they had an open relationship, yes. She says it too, so I'm going by what she's saying. She's saying they do. And that they have threesomes with multiple celebrities. They're listed in the book. So yes. Am I gonna go to Will Smith and Jada and ask them that? No, I'm not.
Okay.
Okay.
So
am I going to ask Jamie Foxx that?
Could you pull that up for me? I want to show you something.
Sure.
Now, again, you got to remember, this is a book that he got allegedly through a thumb drive, a USB drive stick that has not only Kim Porter's alleged diaries, but tapes and evidence. And he was given this after Kim's passing in a way to sort of get the truth out there by others. That's ultimately what this is about. Now, this guy's written some other books, other crime stories, etc., and that's ultimately, I guess, why he was selected. It's still a little confusing to me, but here's some more. Will Smith coming up again.
These are serious.
What do you think?
Let's talk about Cuba Gooding Jr., the actor who has faced legal troubles after being accused of various crimes by multiple women. His name being connected to the Diddy scandal only adds to his problems. Similarly, major music industry executives like Lucian Grange and Jimmy Iovine, though their exact involvement is unclear, are also tied to the story. This highlights just how wide-reaching and serious this issue might be.
The A-list celebrities linked to Diddy and his alleged sexual assaults are trying to keep their identities private. That's after his firm sent out demand letters. Diddy is currently locked up and facing multiple charges, including racketeering and human trafficking. Despite 2 requests to be released, Diddy has his mother, Janice Combs, has spoken out for the first time since this arrest. She released a statement. It reads, "It is heartbreaking to see my son judged not for the truth, but for a narrative created out of lies. My son is not the monster they have painted him to be, and he deserves a chance to tell his side." Joining us to talk about it here on The Factor Uncensored tonight, we have defense attorney and former Harris County prosecutor Biogia Kingbala, Harris County Precinct 1 trafficking director Kathy Griffin-Grignon, and radio personality J Mac from 97.9 The Box. Glad to have you all here on The Factor Uncensored. So, J Mac, when you hear that there could be more people out there, more celebrities, right, who are already settling cases quietly, are you surprised? Are you shocked?
That's a smart thing to do. You don't want us in your business. You don't want to be on the Isaiah Factor.
On the morning show, right?
On the morning show. And then you heard his mom. She's doing what a mom is supposed to do. If you pay my bills, I would say, hey, that's not the guy I know.
But then again, of course, you don't treat your mother that way. You may not tell your mother what's going on.
Come on, man. His mama know. Oh, his mama know.
Trust me. I'm being naive. The naivete is showing tonight.
Your mom is going to always know what you're doing. You might think she don't know, but she know.
Got it. Biogi, let's talk about some of the celebrities, which no names have been named as of yet, who may have settled these cases. Is that the prudent, smart thing to do?
I think considering that these civil cases are closely tied to the federal case that Diddy's facing, it's certainly a smart thing to do to perhaps try to get your name out of the public eye, get your name away from the specter of the federal investigators, and just try to settle your case privately, assuming that there is some sufficient evidence to believe that these civil attorneys.
In addition, Justin Deere Gomez, Diddy's son, is also mentioned in the cases, adding a personal aspect to the scandal. Being accused by outsiders is one thing, but having your own family caught in the middle makes it even more complicated. Whether Justin is directly or indirectly involved raises questions about how much he knew and whether being close to his father's lifestyle exposed him to the darker sides of the entertainment industry.
Our legal analyst is Michael Moore. Michael's with me now. Let's just deal with if you will, the logistics before we turn to the gravamen. The refusal of bail in these circumstances, bearing in mind he'd flown to New York to turn himself in, so he was preempted by the police. Are you surprised that he was refused bail?
Well, I'm glad to be with you. I'm not surprised at all. I mean, the nature of these charges are so serious, the allegations are so serious, that it's not surprising that this hearing he was denied bail. The judge has to look at things like whether or not he can be expected to return to court. Does he have the manner and means to perhaps evade law enforcement and not appear? Is he a flight risk, in other words? And so I think at this point, the judge has decided that the fact that he was doing these acts in secret did not obviously lend much to his statements that he will be open and available. So I'm not surprised at all. But again, we will see what the district judge now does since the case has been, or the decision has been at least appealed up, whether or not there are some terms of bail that might make the court comfortable that he will show up for court.
Now, turning to the charges themselves, they are amongst the most serious, which would involve very long periods of incarceration if convicted. But it also raises the question, if there was a plea deal at some point in the future, to plead down from these very serious charges, the lesser accepted offences would also be serious and could end up in prison.
I think any plea discussion of the case, because you have such significant impact on the victims of the case, would necessitate that he be sentenced to prison in some way. I just don't think that a judge would take and place him on probation or some type of house arrest, given the allegations that were made, no matter what the plea discussions were. And remember, the prosecution and a defendant can negotiate a plea amongst themselves, but a court has the decision finally on whether or not to accept that recommendation, and ultimately has the authority to make a decision about whether or not a prison sentence is appropriate. We operate under the federal sentencing guidelines. Those give the judge some parameters to consider, things like whether or not somebody accepts responsibility, whether or not there have been an adverse impact on victims, whether or not there's been excessive fraud and deceit through the investigation of the case. Those things come into play as we talk about what might happen if there is a plea agreement that's ultimately reached.
It's important to remember, besides obviously he's innocent until proven guilty at the moment, but it's also important to remember that not being a nice person, being an unnice person, if you will, is not a crime. They're going to have to prove the elements of the offences in these cases. Just because he might not be likable is not enough to get you locked up.
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. And this is an indictment. These are merely allegations, and he has a right to have his case tried in court.
One of the most interesting aspects of this lawsuit is how it blurs the lines between association and complicity. For example, rapper Young Miami, who has been romantically linked to Diddy, is also named in the case, raising questions about her involvement.
The government has to prove that he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The indictment, the allegations we heard from the United States Attorney in New York, these are sordid details. They are particularly troubling as it relates to whether or not the allegations are true, or whether or not certain people, victims in the case, were given drugs at the time to get them to do these sex acts, whether or not there's been some effort to blackmail or extort or silence victims in the case by the use of videotaped, and to call it pornography would probably be too nice. I would just say dark type of pornography, it sounds like. These are things that a judge is going to have to consider as we go forward.
Finally, back to the logistics, if you will. He was prepared to turn himself in today, so we understand. The arrest removed from him the almost right to bail. Since I was going to turn myself in, I'm entitled to bail if I'd had turned myself in. By arresting him, the prosecution removed that possibility.
Well, they certainly removed the argument for him to make that he had turned himself in. It's mighty hard to, when you fly into town on a jet and you're there, to argue that there's no possible way you could be a flight risk. And that's one of the things the judge would consider. Another thing would be the nature of the charges, the allegations that were made. They spanned a long period of time. There were efforts to influence witnesses, it sounds like. At least that's been an allegation that has been made. These are all things that get put into that decision. The fact that he just would have turned himself in, that would have been in his favor. But there are so many other factors at play that it wouldn't have surprised me to see a court dig into those a little bit in making a decision on whether bail would be appropriate. And at this stage, a judge has determined that bail is not appropriate. He has a right, and has done apparently so, to appeal that decision and have another hearing on it. At that time, his lawyers will have a chance to make these arguments about, the efforts that he was making to cooperate and to get there. The term cooperation, frankly, sometimes gets to be a little loosey-goosey, depending on who's wanting to use the argument to their benefit.
It seems like there might be a typo or mix-up in the text you provided. Could you please clarify the content or the message you'd like me to rewrite? I'll be happy to help once I understand it better.
Defendant in one of these cases and someone suing you, would they typically require a non-disclosure agreement to be signed once they settle it with the plaintiff or the victim in this case?
If I was an attorney representing one of these individuals accused, I would certainly request for that before agreeing to any out-of-court settlement. Otherwise, it kind of takes away the point of doing it out of court. It's going to end up being public. I might as well continue to fight the allegations.
And sometimes, Catherine, when you're a victim in human trafficking or sex crimes like this, money can't always satisfy you. And do you foresee any of these individuals, whether it's men or women, coming forward later, even though they've signed the NDA, even though they've been paid, saying, look, it was me and this is who did it?
Well, after you get paid, right? Okay, and you done spent that money, and then you got to take care of the I, the R, and the S, who are real pimps, then they're gonna talk. What's done in the dark comes to the light. And I know you don't have a 50-foot bed in your backyard, do you?
Don't assume too much.
I'm just trying to tell you. But it's interesting because I was, I've been following it, and today on TMZ, it was stated that a celebrity that's bigger than P. Diddy, the feds have that individual.
Can I say something? What do you think Will Smith would say if I called him up on his cell phone? I pull his number through a PI, right? And I call him up. And I go, when Kim was pregnant, she says she's on the phone with you. And that Sean's on the phone with you, Will. And that he's talking about this. Do you think he's going to admit that really happened? Right now, with everything that's going on with Sean Combs and all these celebrities are silent right now, do you really think he's going to talk to me? Do you think he's going to admit to that?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, I'm just giving you.
The reason why I'm saying this because
I don't think any of us expect that Will's going to answer that question honestly.
The book alleges that Diddy kept a vault of tapes documenting his alleged sexual encounters. Was there any hard evidence that such a vault existed?
The sources say there was a vault that existed, yes. And some of the tapes were flown out of the country on a private jet.
I paused for effect because a vault did exist, according to his sources, and those tapes that were in the vault were flown to other countries.
That's from the sources directly, so I have to believe them.
And this
Not have to, but
right.
I have no way. How am I going to?
You see how that you run it that you have.
Do you expect me to go in as safe at a
Well, no.
I'm a shot.
No. What I'm asking you is, like I said once again, because you're the guy who's spearheading this thing that allegedly comes from Kim. So me asking the questions, I'm like a can of spray paint.
Yeah.
I don't know. You know what I mean? Yeah. I don't know which wall to go, and tell them. Right. So that's the reason why I ask these questions because I actually don't know. So like I said.
Now, fair, but he's a little aggressive in this. The commenters agreed. Let's get a little bit more into these tapes.
So you didn't. These are other things that you didn't include in. And why did you keep that out?
Correct. Because I can't reveal everything at once. It's too shocking.
It's too shocking if he reveals everything he knows at once. Now, one could argue, oh, come on, dude, just put it all out there. But he's now alleging it's that bad, guys. And here's that quote from the beginning in full context.
If I was to release those tapes, the world would shut down. Okay? If I showed one of these tapes, I'm telling you right now, the whole music industry and Hollywood, it would just grind down like this. They're all going to start pointing at each other like this, and it's going to be bad. We've already set it up. We have multiple attorneys. We know how to do it. It's not my first rodeo. I solved the greatest murder case in history, 3 of them. I know how to do it. We're going to do it, but just going to come in pieces. And there's also ways we can, let's say, not censor it, but we can kind of soften it, right? Like the whole tape doesn't have to come out. All the tape. I don't have all the tapes. There's other people that have the tapes. I can't control them. We already know they're shopping.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
I've had clients describe MDC as hell, as the worst conditions they've been in.
Lance A. Clark is a federal defense attorney who's been there many times.
Now, if the government is going to mandate that they are responsible for your well-being, they have to ensure the safety of your well-being.
Occupy the streets until they get heat. In the winter of 2019, protests over a power outage left inmates without light or heat for a week in the cold.
I understand how cold it must be in those cells, and not to have any electricity, any lights, and to not be able to communicate with your family is just inhumane.
The prison has about 1,200 detainees and is the only federal prison in the nation's largest city. The DOJ shut down New York City's the Metropolitan Correctional Center back in 2021, 2 years after Jeffrey Epstein died by suicide there. A Bureau of Prisons spokesman telling NBC News they, quote, take seriously addressing the staffing and other challenges at MDC Brooklyn, adding the director appointed an urgent action team and they've increased.
MDC historically has had tremendous problems and the problems aren't resolved.
Combs' lawyers originally hoping he could await trial under house arrest at his mansion, now arguing for him to be moved to a prison in New Jersey in the lead up to this trial, citing the prison's poor conditions, violence, and deaths. On Wednesday, his lawyer said he was being held in a special housing unit with an extra level of security.
Yasmin's back with us now. So what is next? Is he going to be in jail in this facility until the trial begins? Is there a chance he could, get moved earlier than that?
As of this moment, as of this hour, as of today, yes. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, they're going to be appealing this thing next to the Second U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals to overturn the judge's order here to try and get him actually released to his mansion on $50 million bail, wanting a GPS monitoring system, limited visits from family members, friends, so on and so forth. That is what they're proposing because of course, the violence I talked about in that piece inside these jail walls. They also, in the meantime, Hal, want to get him moved to a jail and or prison in New Jersey. The judge so far has essentially said that is up to the Bureau of Prisons to make that decision. Nonetheless, it's all going to be on appeals leading up to the trial. His next court appearance, by the way, October 9th. So looking for that, of course, in any decision.
The business empire he controlled to carry out criminal activity, including sex trafficking, forced labor, kidnapping, arson, bribery, and the obstruction of justice. Let me say a little bit more about the charges. The indictment alleges that Combs abused and exploited women and other people for years, and in a variety of ways. As alleged, Combs used force, threats of force, and coercion to cause victims to engage in extended sexual performances with male commercial sex workers, some of whom he transported or caused to be transported over state lines. Combs allegedly planned and controlled the sex performances, which he called freak-offs, and he often electronically recorded them. The freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant. As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse so that they would participate in the freak-offs, and that Combs hit, kicked, threw objects at, and dragged victims, at times by their hair. On one occasion in March of 2016, that conduct was captured on video and later reported in the media. Specifically, Combs kicked, dragged, and threw a vase at a victim in a Los Angeles hotel when the victim was attempting to flee. As alleged, these assaults often resulted in injuries to the victims, which took days or weeks to heal. In addition to the violence, the indictment alleges that Combs threatened and coerced victims to get them to participate in the freak-offs. He used the embarrassing and sensitive recordings he made of the freak-offs as collateral against the victims. And the indictment alleges that he maintained control over the victims in several ways, including by giving them drugs, by giving and threatening to take away financial support or housing, by promising them career opportunities, by monitoring their whereabouts, and even by dictating their physical appearance. Because of all of this, the indictment alleges that the victims did not believe they could refuse Combs without risking their security or facing more abuse. The indictment also alleges other acts of violence undertaken by Combs and others, including violence against witnesses to his abuse, kidnapping, and arson. The indictment alleges that on more than one occasion, Combs carried or brandished firearms to intimidate and threaten victims and witnesses. Now, Combs did not do this all on his own. As I mentioned, Combs has been charged with RICO conspiracy. He used his business and employees of that business and other close associates to get his way.
You should always advocate for yourself and be a voice for yourself. You should never let what somebody else did ruin or run your life.
A 38-year-old mother from Alabama who has filed a lawsuit accusing Sean Diddy Combs and Jay-Z of raping her when she was 13 years old is speaking out to NBC News for the first time. She asked us not to reveal her identity.
What made you want to come forward and talk today?
Because I think that I've been quiet long enough about what I've been through, and it's been hard enough to be quiet. But it's a chapter of my life that I'd like to close.
An NBC News review of her account found inconsistencies with her allegations. She says that she went to the MTV Video Music Awards in 2000 to catch a glimpse of her favorite celebrities.
You weren't scared to be all alone?
No, with having autism is like feeling like you live your life in a shatterproof juggle ball. The world's on fire. The fire is inside the ball with you, but there's no way for you to get out.
In addition to having autism, the woman says she suffered a head injury. The night of the 2000s VMAs, she says a friend drove her from Rochester, New York to Manhattan, a more than 5-hour drive. Her attorney provided NBC News with the name of the friend who has since died. The woman says she spoke to Combs' limo driver, who offered her a ride to an after party.
I stumbled upon Diddy's driver, who told me that I was exactly what Diddy was looking for.
What did you think when he said that to you?
I thought it meant that I was just pretty.
She went to a White House, she says, where she spoke to musicians Benji Madden and his brother.
I'm talking to Benji Madden about his tattoo because, I have about his tattoo that's the Last Supper because I have a religious background. So it was just something to talk about.
In a statement to NBC News, a representative of the Maddens confirmed that they did not attend the 2000 VMAs and that they were on tour in the Midwest at the time. At the after party, she says she had a drink.
Request for bail a second time, and the place where he's locked up now getting a lot of attention. The Metropolitan Detention Center, the only federal jail in New York City, is known for violence, poor conditions, and a string of celebrity detainees. And Diddy's attorneys want him out. NBC News' Yasmin Youssein has more.
From his $48 million Miami mansion to hell on earth where chaos reigns. Just some of the words used to describe the Metropolitan Detention Center where Sean Diddy Combs is now being held without bail after pleading not guilty to sex trafficking and racketeering charges.
Combs abused, threatened, and coerced victims to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
He is not the first high-profile inmate to pass through these walls. Ghislaine Maxwell, R. Kelly, Pharma Bro, Martin Shkreli, and crypto fraudster Sam Bankman-Fried, all as they waited for their federal criminal trials, called this jail home. But the conditions of the prison are far from homey, notoriously described as, quote, dreadful, as one judge put it. Some on the bench have even moved away from sending nonviolent defendants there. In April, a group of detainees that prosecutors said were MS-13 gang members in court documents stabbed an inmate 44 times in an attack caught on camera. 2 shivs were recovered from the attack. You see them here. The victim survived. And in the last 3 years alone, 4 inmates have died by suicide. And violence is not the only issue. Accusations of medical neglect, staffing shortages, smuggling of drugs, some allegedly facilitated by employees. At least 6 staff members charged with crimes in the last 5 years, according to the AP. Some accused of accepting bribes and providing contraband.
Remember, celebrity culture often blurs the lines between glamour and reality. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to check out the next video. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and stay informed. Stay tuned for more updates, and let's keep our news accurate.